welcome. Thank you both for joining us today. I'm Jamie Driver, Executive Director of Independent Schools of St. Louis, and I'm joined today by Alexis Wright, who is the head of school at New City School, and Jonelle Harris, who is the Assistant Director of Admissions, I believe I have that right, at Community School. So two wonderful members of Independent Schools of St. Louis.
Jamie, I'm still the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the school.
Thank you so much. And Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Community. So as many of our wonderful professionals wear many hats within our schools that we are grateful for. So today we are going to kind of demystify the hiring and interview process at independent schools and talk a little bit about what our process is like. So Alexis, why don't we start with you as the head of school at your school. How would you describe the hiring and interview process for independent schools and how it may differ from a process that the public schools traditionally use?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie, for having us. And so I haven't worked in a public school, so can't sort of like speak exactly to that process, but I can tell you, right now we're looking for a couple of teachers for next year. And as I think about, if the resume comes in, it comes into either me or to one of our division heads. We have our search committees, which are generally formed of teachers who would be teaching with this new hire that we have. And we're sort of screening the resumes that way. We'll then reach out with an email or a phone call for an initial visit, right? And it could be to walk through the school, see the classroom, meet a couple of people, or it could be a Zoom or a phone call. And then from that, there's that second stage where you sort of officially become a candidate or finalist, if you will. And then we have those folks come in and spend generally a full day and meeting with me, meeting with the relevant administrators, meeting with the teaching team. So in other words, if we're looking for a kindergarten teacher, they're going to sit and meet the other 3 kindergarten teachers. They may also meet the teachers in first grade and in 4-5s, the specialist teachers. Because what we really want to do is just get a good sense of the candidates' strengths and experience, but we also want them to feel comfortable in an environment and know that they're teaching kindergarten, yes, or whatever the position may be, but they're also working with a very wide range of folks as well. And then at the end, there's also the reference checking. Sometimes we do that up front, sometimes we do it towards the end. I always like to speak to 3 references, including one person who is the candidate's current supervisor. So it can be a lengthy process. It can get drawn out at times, but again, we want to make a good match between the school and the candidate and the school.
Wonderful. And Jonelle, would you add anything to that in terms of how our process looks different than public schools?
Yeah, I think that that was pretty accurate. Since I've taught in public schools before I came to community, and so I would say it is like Alexis explained, that's pretty accurate. The interview process looked very different when I was interviewing in a public school, where you met with the principal and maybe their assistant principal, and that was pretty much it. So there's definitely, for those who are interested in independent schools, the process is a lot more in depth, which I think is great, because then you have an opportunity to also, for the person who's interviewing, meet the different people that you could be potentially working with. And so I think it can seem very overwhelming at first, but I think it's beneficial for both sides to do the process that way.
And Jamie, if I can just add one quick thing I forgot to add, that's I think an important part of the process, is the demo lesson. So we will most often, if not all the time, ask a teaching candidate to do a demo lesson, to come in and be in a classroom and spend 20 to 30 minutes teaching a lesson. And then sometimes it's a little scary because basically all the other teachers and the administrators are in the back of the classroom sort of watching, because we want to get a sense of a person's skill and experience in a classroom with students. So that can often be a daunting process, but I think for most candidates, if you talk to search committee person or whoever's leading the search, they'll talk you through that process so it becomes successful for everybody.
And what's nice about this process is it seems to echo a lot of what we do on the admissions side when we're enrolling students. And that's all about finding the right fit for the student and the family and the school. And it's really echoed on the administrator and teacher side as well. It's about finding the right fit and making sure it's a great match. So can you both speak a little bit about what you're looking for in terms of experience? You know, we know that certification isn't required within independent schools. It's certainly, you know, welcomed if a teacher has it, but it's not a requirement. So can you talk a little bit more about that and what you're looking for experience-wise when you're looking to make that fit between a new teacher and your school? Either one of you.
So it's a good question. I think for me, sometimes, you know, experience can be variable, right? So if you're joining the kindergarten team and the kindergarten team is very experienced already, that might be a time when we could bring somebody on board who has, you know, a beginning teacher or just a few years of experience. But then there are also other times when the situation calls for, yeah, we're going to need somebody with, you know, a good 5 to 7 years of experience, somebody really experienced in the classroom. So I think it just depends upon the school's needs in any given time. Like personally for me though, I will tell you, I am more comfortable than others sometimes taking, I wouldn't even say it's a risk, right? But trying to hire somebody who's at the beginning stages of their career. Like I think mentoring is one of the most important things that we can do as educators. And as long as the school is set up properly that way and you've got mentors in place and support, you know, oftentimes schools will indeed, you know, it's always nice to have somebody who's experienced, but it's also nice to have somebody who, you know, can sort of learn some of those skills along the way as well.
Yeah, I would, I agree with Alexis too. I'm more of a, I know independent schools look for teachers who have a lot of years of experience, but I also think there is something really great about a new teacher. And I find like independent schools to be a great place also as a new teacher, as you're learning and it's in learning your craft and coming up with your teaching style. I feel like it presents a very supportive environment for that. I am out because I taught in public schools, so I did get my certification. And, you know, but when I was interviewing to be a teacher, since I started at community school as a JK teacher, it is experience that they're looking at. And I agree with Alexis. I think there's benefits to both. So like you said, there are times when you want someone with a little more years of experience. I think especially looking at your older grades, your 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, just because that time of the year for your students and what you're working on is just so much more intense. But I do see that there's a great opportunity with a 1, 2, 3 year teacher coming in. So I would say to anybody who's interested, even if you are just out of, you just graduated, or you know, you've only had a few months in, to not let that keep you from applying, because I think that there are opportunities and circumstances where, you know, that's a benefit, and it's great. And it's a great place to learn your craft.
Absolutely. And you've both talked certainly about mentoring as being one of the wonderful benefits of working in an independent school. Can you both address also what are some of the other benefits, and in other words, professional development, opportunities for growth, for even leadership opportunities once an educator is hired in one of our schools? Can you both address that? What will they find once they're hired and they join your community?
Yeah, so I think you find a highly collegial environment. Typically smaller class sizes than perhaps what you might find in some public schools. The professional development, I think all of our schools are deeply committed to professional development, and we have budgets that support that and help to sustain that. So it's not about just hiring somebody, it's how do we continually help them get better with their their craft. And so some of that professional development is in-house, some of it's you got to get on a plane and go to, and schools will provide that for you. We have generally small environments where, it's sort of easy to get to know all the kids. It's easy to get to know all the adults, and you work very closely together. And I do think there are some real advantages to being in that sort of close-knit community, and one that is really supported by our families as well. So there's a high degree of interaction with our parents, in the school. And so whether that's, email or conferences or at arrival, dismissal, like parents are an integral part of our independent schools. And so that's a piece that teachers need to be prepared to manage or work with as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I find, because it is a smaller environment, you're really able to get to know the people you're working with very well. Professional development is huge. I've talked about this many other times at the ISSL Diversity Fair, because it's one of, there's many things I love about being an independent school, but it's one of my favorite because the professional development is so intentional. So, I can say, there's this great conference on learning, about executive function, and that would really be helpful to me. I can do that. There's, instead of, I know in public schools, we had professional development, but usually it was just geared to this is what we are learning about at this time. So it wasn't always something you could take back to the classroom and actually apply it to your students. And in independent schools, you're actually like, well, here's what I'm seeing in my classroom. I would love to learn more about that. Is there a conference or workshop I go to, whether it's local or out of town? Of course, we all love to, when we can travel, it's fun to go places. So that is huge to me, a huge benefit of being in an independent school. And yeah, the class sizes, you have the opportunity, at our school, you've got more than one teacher in the classroom. So you have, in the smaller class sizes, so you have this opportunity to really get to know your students, take the time to meet their needs. You have ability to have conversation with your division directors. So there's an upper and lower division director. And I feel like it's such a great relationship where you can pick their brain. You're really working together for the success of your students. So it's very, there's a lot of opportunity there to find these new creative ways to do your job, to help the students. And it's a really great environment to work in.
I want to pick up on the word you said, creative, Janelle. I mean, from a curricular standpoint as well, and this is something we would sort of prize and look for in candidates, is that idea of creativity, right? And so, yes, we've got benchmarks, we've got skills and content we need to hit, but it's not as prescribed, I believe, as you might find in a public school. And so therefore as the teacher, you get to use your creativity, your personal experience to sort of build out some of those curricular experiences for the children. You get to teach your passion, which I think it helps keep you engaged, it helps keep the children engaged. But it's not only your passion, but then it's also, what if you've got a group of 4-year-olds in front of you and, several of them have an interest in birds, the bird they saw on the playground, or the elevator ride that they took on a field trip. Like, it's up to you to sort of keep that passion going, and you've got the freedom in your curriculum to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
absolutely. That's great. So as we close out our conversation this morning, what advice would both of you have for candidates who are applying to work in our schools, whether it's through the interview process, whether it's something to include on their resume? What advice would you give to candidates, to both of you?
I would say, I think it's important for the candidates to have questions prepared to ask who's interviewing them, because you are also every independent school is different. It all has its own culture, and nothing's good or bad, they're just different. So you also want to find a good fit for you. So come prepared to ask questions about, to find out more about who you'd be working with, find out more about how some of what the day looks like, and check out a lot of different schools, and because it is, they're interviewing you, but you also are interviewing them, and you want to make sure that that this is a good match. So check out a lot of different schools. Definitely, I would say too, as I'll put on my DEI hat, and we are looking for those who are, that needs to be diversity, equity, inclusion needs to be a part of, that's a part of the process. It's, I sit on all interviews, so look at what the mission statement is, look at the diversity statement of the school, make sure it aligns with what you are, you can also align with that, because those things will come up in the interview process. So just being prepared, and prepared to ask questions as well.
That's great advice. And the only other thing I would add is just, I do think that sometimes there are some stereotypes about independent schools, private schools. And so going into the process with an open mind and recognizing the diversity and the range of independent schools, single sex, co-ed, sort of urban setting, suburban setting, elementary school, secondary school, religious affiliation. So there is a wide range of schools. And I think that's an important piece for candidates to understand as they get to know the schools and ask those questions.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent advice. And we look forward, of course, to meeting many of our candidates at our upcoming Diversity Teacher Job Fair, and encourage them also to check out the Independent Schools of St. Louis website for lots of information on our schools and on hiring. So I thank you so much for being here with me today.